Spring is back, and I am out here recording videos again. Not compulsory, but uh, something significant happened this week that I figured would be worth talking about. So, last 2 weeks ago now, actually, I went ahead and made a post on Reddit about some of the things that have worked for me, specifically admitting that I cannot find the self, admitting that I can't find the past or the future, admitting that I can't confirm the existence of space, admitting that I can't find any distress, admitting that there's nothing that arises here that would not arise for an enlightened person, and then admitting that this is enlightenment. So that was sort of 7 or 8 months ago, the thing that kind of broke the seeking. Since then, there's been plenty of exploring, but it's not the same as seeking. There is nothing that I'm trying to find. There is no future that's better. There's nothing that could be better than this moment. But there's still plenty of interest there. There's still plenty of exploring for exploration's sake. So I posted, not all of that, I just posted the sort of what works for me part on Reddit. It was met with mixed results. I had one person who wanted to reach out to me and talk a little bit more about it, and so we did that. That was fun. I had several folks that definitely wanted to put up some disagreement as to why this wasn't enlightenment. And one person who I said something about wanting to get into coaching, and I had one person who was just like, well, 7 months really isn't enough time. I think it might be a little dangerous for you to get into coaching now. And I struck up more of an ongoing conversation with her, and she started asking me all these questions, right? Felt like kind of a checklist of, an enlightenment checklist, which in fairness is kind of what I was doing in my post, was checking off these things and saying, well, I must be enlightened. But she was asking a lot of questions about what I was experiencing, what my experience was. And I started off, by talking about how, there's practical reality and ontological reality. That's kind of how I see this. And the experience is really a practical reality thing. But I went into that a little bit with her about some experiences, and she asked specifically, how is the body experienced? And that sort of unearthed something in me when she asked that question, and I couldn't answer it right away. My initial answer would have been, it's just normal, right? Everything is completely and perfectly normal. Nothing has changed. And that would be true. But I resisted that answer and recognized there was a part of me that was disappointed by that answer. And I did eventually respond to her, and I phrased it to her like, it's that feeling when you realize you haven't come through on a promise you were supposed to do, and you're scrambling to figure out how to resolve that before the person that you promised notices. That's kind of what it felt like. And the promise had been that this would be different, that enlightenment would be better, that it would be a better experience. And wrapped up in that promise were all these ideas about what enlightenment was, right? And experiences that I have had, right? Such as the um, what I used to call the sensory stew, where it's just like, there's sight, there's sound, there's hot, there's cold, there's all these sensations, sensory experiences, but they're completely disconnected. It's all melted into one kind of stew. I've gotten there with meditation, and at some point I thought that that's what enlightenment would be. It would be walking around in the sensory stew all the time. And that's not what it turned out to be, right? It didn't turn out to be any particular physical, bodily experience. What it turned out to be was all experiences, every experience, any experience that could be had. There's no right experience or no wrong experience. When I came to that, that's when I began using the word enlightenment to refer to what's going on here. But I also gave up on the search for something else at that time. I gave up on the search for something better, right? For what would be a better experience, a better life, right? I gave up on the search for more. And once I gave that up, I never really went back and addressed it until she asked me that question, and it really came up, that aspect of me that was disappointed about having given that up or having failed in some way to find what I had been seeking, because ultimately there wasn't really ever anything to find. And so that put me in a moment where I started meditating more and started noticing the experiences of the body, and being able to get myself in states of that feeling where there's nothing, there's no solidity, any of that kind of stuff. And but I noticed that it wasn't any better than any other state. It wasn't any better than any other experience. And eventually I came back to this: whatever's going on is it. That's all that's needed. And so I eventually responded with all that information to her. But some of the things that have come out of that is that the question she was asking about a person, right? She was asking about a person having experiences. And the thing is, there isn't really a person having experiences. And so when we talk about what's going on, if I say there's no time, there's no space, there's no one here, that sounds like an experience that I am having, but it can't be an experience that I am having, is the thing. There's no one here having any kind of experience. And so it really got me thinking down that path, and really recognizing that there is no experience, right? So experience, just like the self, is a word we use to sort of combine all these other things, right? So there are thoughts that respond to things that are going on out there, feelings that respond to thoughts and other things, and thoughts that respond to the feelings in here, and all of that responds to each other, but there isn't really anything that makes that an experience. So yeah, no experience. So can't really talk about this can't talk about what's happening with me. There's no me.